Have you ever felt like just a shadow within your own family? I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, and endured long enough, someday, they would finally see me. But what I didn't realize was, sometimes, to truly find your worth, you have to step away from the very place that hurt you the most. This is the story of how I, the forgotten child, rebuilt my life with nothing but my own two hands and an unwavering belief in myself. My name is Anna. I'm 33 years old. Born and raised in a small town in Pennsylvania. From a young age, I knew I was just a faint shadow in my family, standing beside my perfect younger brother, Tyler. Tyler is 2 years younger than me. But from the day he was born, my parents, Evelyn and Martin, seemed to forget they ever had a daughter. Whenever I earned high grades or received praise from teachers, they would only nod politely. But if Tyler merely passed a basic test, the whole house would erupt in celebration. I can still vividly remember standing quietly in the corner, clutching my certificate, while everyone else swirled around Tyler, not a single glance spared for me. The favoritism wasn't just in their words. On birthdays, Tyler always got big parties and expensive gifts. Me? A discounted t-shirt, a cheap notebook. One year, I only received a pair of gray socks while Tyler was gifted a brand new mountain bike. When I turned away to hide my tears, my mother simply shrugged and said, "Girls don't need bikes." Growing up in that environment, I learned to be silent. Not to ask. Not to hope. As for Tyler, he became accustomed to being handed everything without effort. Things only worsened after Tyler married Stephanie. Stephanie was beautiful, charming and incredibly skilled at playing the victim. The smallest incident could be spun into a full-blown tragedy in her hands. And if anyone dared to push back, Stephanie would burst into tears and shift all the blame onto them. Naturally, my parents always sided with her. They adored Stephanie as if she were their own flesh and blood. Despite having a college degree, Stephanie refused to work. Tyler worked himself to the bone providing for the family, while my mother happily babysat their 3 young children every day. The once quiet 3-bedroom home became filled with crying toddlers and Stephanie's endless complaints about how hard her life was. I chose a different path. I moved out right after graduating, worked hard, and steadily climbed the ranks to become a manager at a furniture company. I rarely went back home. And every time I did, I felt like a stranger in the very place I grew up. Last year, when the pandemic struck, the company was forced to lay off employees. I lost my job after receiving just a short email. Soon after, I lost my apartment too. Unable to keep up with rent. With no other options, I gathered all my courage and called my parents, hoping I could stay with them for a few months while I searched for a new job. I remember that moment vividly. When my mother picked up the phone, I nervously explained my situation. Within seconds, she burst out laughing as if I had just told her a ridiculous joke. "The house is full, Anna," she said coldly. "We can't afford to feed another mouth." I stood there in stunned silence. From somewhere in the background, I heard Stephanie's mocking voice. "She better get used to the real world. It's called growing up." Tyler, the brother I once shared every slice of cake and every toy with, just shrugged at me, his eyes hollow, as if I were a complete stranger. I walked out of my parents' house carrying nothing but an old, battered suitcase and the last few dollars left in my bank account. I had nowhere to go. My apartment was gone. My friends were crammed into small spaces and couldn't take anyone else in. Desperate, I drove my beat-up 2005 Ford Ranger to the parking lot of a Walmart. From that day on, the old truck and the rundown camper I had bought online for $1,500 became my only home. At first, I told myself it was just temporary. A week, maybe 2. But 3 months went by. I learned to shower at a gym, use the restroom at gas stations, and charge my phone at cheap coffee shops. Every night, I parked in a quiet neighborhood, praying no one would notice the old, rusty truck sitting under the dark sky. In the winter nights, I wore 3 layers of clothing and curled up inside a thin sleeping bag, listening to the wind howl against the camper's thin walls. In the summer mornings, I would wake up drenched in sweat before the sun even rose. But the hardest part wasn't the cold, or the heat. It was the looks of disgust from people passing by, the way they stared when they saw me crawl out of that battered old camper. Many times, I almost gave up. There were nights I sat curled up in the driver's seat, imagining myself crawling back to my parents' house, begging for forgiveness, swallowing their disdain just for a roof over my head. But every time, the image of Stephanie, arms crossed, smirking triumphantly, flashed through my mind, and I would grip the steering wheel tighter and whisper to myself, "No, I'd rather die out here than become their puppet again." I applied for jobs everywhere. Restaurants, supermarkets, convenience stores, anywhere with a help wanted sign. Dozens of failed interviews, hundreds of rejections. But I didn't give up. I practiced smiling more, speaking with confidence, standing tall, even when inside I felt like crumbling. Then, one sweltering September afternoon, the call I had been praying for finally came. A small interior design company in the suburbs of Pittsburgh wanted to meet with me. After hearing my story, they decided to give me a chance. The starting salary was barely enough to survive. But for me, it was a lifeline. I threw myself into the work, never turning down a single extra shift, from customer service to warehouse support. By day, I worked myself to exhaustion. By night, I crawled back into the suffocating heat of my camper to snatch a few hours of sleep. I saved every penny. Homemade sandwiches, thrift store clothes, not a single dollar spent frivolously. Whenever despair crept in, I reminded myself, one day, I will walk into a house built by my own hands. After a year of relentless work, I finally found it. A small 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Beaver. The walls were peeling. The yard was overrun with weeds. But to me, it looked more beautiful than any palace. The asking price was $92 more than I had saved. But I didn't back down. I submitted a loan application, showed them my pay stubs, and presented a tightly planned repayment schedule. And then, the bank approved it. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of light at the end of the long, dark tunnel of my life. I poured all my savings into the down payment. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I held the keys to my very first home in my hand. It was just me, an old backpack, an air mattress, and a pride so overwhelming that I collapsed onto the bare floor in tears. I walked barefoot across the creaky wooden floors, running my hand over every rough wall, whispering, "Finally, I have a place of my own." I parked my battered old camper in the backyard as a reminder of how far I had come from those darkest days. Every time I glanced out the window and saw the faint glow from that old camper, I smiled. I had survived. I had endured. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was on the right path. But that happiness didn't last long. One Saturday afternoon, as I was mopping the floor, the doorbell rang loud and urgent. I opened the door and froze. Standing on my front porch were my parents, Tyler, Stephanie, and their 3 kids. Without waiting for an invitation, they barged inside like they owned the place. My mother glanced around the living room with a smug smile curling on her lips. Stephanie gave me a cold, mocking look. "Well, Anna," my mother finally said after a heavy silence, "this house seems a bit big for a single woman like you. Doesn't it?" I clenched my fists. Every instinct screamed that a storm was coming. Tyler flopped down on the couch, propping his feet up on the table like he was at home. He started rambling about traffic, work, and how the kids needed more space. Stephanie chimed in, her voice sugar sweet but ice cold. "Given the situation, we think it's best if we move in. You still have that camper out back, right?" I stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Living in the house," Tyler said nonchalantly. "You can move back into the camper. You're used to it anyway." He shrugged, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You don't need all this space just for yourself." I stared at them. A wave of fury and bitterness surged inside me. Where were they when I was freezing in a parking lot through the winter? Where were they when I begged for shelter and was laughed out the door? And now, when I had finally built something for myself, they had the audacity to try and take it away. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "No," I said, My voice as solid as stone. This is my house. You have no right here. Tyler's face darkened. Stephanie sprang up from the couch. Arms crossed. Eyes blazing. You're so selfish, Anna, she hissed. Your family needs you. Are you really going to leave the kids crammed into that tiny old house? I turned toward my parents. Just hoping for one shred of fairness. But they just lowered their eyes. Silent. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. My father said coldly. This is your family. I laughed a dry, bitter sound that even I didn't recognize as my own. Where was my family when I needed them? I said through gritted teeth. When I was sleeping in my truck during the freezing winter. What did you do? Don't you dare talk to me about family. The room grew heavy, as if the very air was freezing solid. Without warning, Stephanie lunged. Before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face. The crack echoed sharply through the room. My head snapped to the side. My cheek burned with pain. You deserve it, Stephanie screamed, tears streaming down her face. You're selfish. You deserve to be alone. I touched my cheek, still burning from the slap. Years of swallowing pain, of silent endurance shattered in that single moment. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and said clearly, I need the police. I've been assaulted, and there are trespassers in my home. The room fell deadly silent. Tyler stammered, tugging Stephanie's arm. My parents paled, standing frozen like statues. I pressed the phone to my ear. My gaze locked firmly on them. Leave my house now. If you're still here when the police arrive, you'll explain it to them yourselves. Stephanie growled under her breath, muttering curses. Tyler tried to smooth things over weakly. But I didn't budge. This was my house. No one was going to take it from me again. Less than 10 minutes later, the police arrived. I showed them the footage from my security camera, everything from them barging in to Stephanie slapping me. The officers gave me a look full of sympathy, then firmly ordered them to leave the premises immediately. Before walking out, my mother gave me one last look full of rage and bitter disappointment as if I were the traitor. But I didn't care. I had never betrayed them. They had abandoned me long ago. I thought it was over. But I was wrong 3 days later. After a long shift, I returned home and froze. The locks had been changed. Strange furniture was scattered across my living room. My beloved old camper had been dragged out to the curb. I rushed to the door and pounded on it. The door swung open. Tyler and Stephanie stood there, wearing matching smug expressions. What are you doing here? Stephanie asked, her voice sickeningly sweet. This is our house now. I stiffened, forcing myself to stay calm. What kind of game are you playing? I demanded. Tyler shrugged and pulled out a stack of papers. We have a legal lease agreement. You already signed it, Anna. I snatched the papers from him and skimmed through them. A sloppy forgery. The signature didn't even remotely match mine. I let out a cold, hollow laugh. Pathetic, I said. You can't even forge properly. Stephanie crossed her arms, smirking. Don't waste your time. We're already settled in. You can go back to living in your little camper. Without hesitation, I turned around, pulled out my phone, and called 911. I calmly gave the dispatcher my address and said, there are intruders in my home. I need police assistance immediately. Stephanie panicked and slammed the door shut. I sat down heavily on the porch steps, clutching my phone in my hand. The rage inside me boiled over. This was my house. The home I had earned through sleepless nights, skipped meals, and freezing months huddled inside an old camper. No one, not even blood relatives, had the right to take it from me. 15 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers approached, calm but focused. I explained everything: the changed locks, the fake lease, the unauthorized occupation. It took a while before Tyler finally opened the door. He looked furious. Stephanie clutched her stomach, pretending to be pregnant in the most unconvincing way possible. Silently, I handed the officers my phone, showing them footage from my security cameras. Them breaking the lock, dragging furniture inside, changing the locks. The evidence was undeniable. The officers exchanged a glance and nodded. One of them turned to Tyler and Stephanie. His voice stern. You are trespassing on private property. This is a criminal offense. Tyler stammered, waving the forged lease papers like a flimsy shield. But with just a glance, one of the officers said sharply, "We'll need to verify the signature. Anna, may we see your ID?" I handed over my driver's license. My real signature looked nothing like the forgery. No more words were necessary. The officers immediately ordered them to pack up their belongings and leave or be arrested for trespassing and document forgery. Stephanie broke down in tears, clinging to one of the officers, begging. Tyler turned red, shouting in frustration. But this time no one came to save them. I stood there silently, watching as they dragged out their suitcases. Children's toys, all the things they had no right to bring in. I saw the fury twisting Tyler's face. I saw the bitter tears streaming down Stephanie's cheeks. But inside, I felt only a cold, relentless resolve. The house was cleared out in a heavy, angry silence. Before leaving, Stephanie threw me a hateful glare and screamed, "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I simply slammed the door in their faces, closing it on years of pain and betrayal. When everything finally fell silent, I slid down onto the floor and let out a deep, heavy breath. Out in the backyard, my old camper still sat quietly. A worn, stubborn reminder of everything I had survived. I knew this wasn't over. But today, I had defended the most important thing, myself. That night, I sat in front of my laptop, hands still trembling with anger and resolve. I had been silent for far too long. Not this time. I decided to speak. I wrote a long post on Facebook where every relative could see it. I laid everything out, from beginning to end. Being rejected when I was unemployed. Being mocked. Having my home broken into. The forged lease. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't lie. I attached photos, security footage, the police report, even side-by-side images of my real and forged signatures. At the end, I wrote, "I have stayed silent long enough. This is the truth. Believe it or not, that's your choice. But I will no longer let anyone walk all over my life." Within an hour, the post exploded. Comments and messages flooded in. Some relatives, the ones I thought would side with Tyler and my parents, shocked me by openly criticizing them instead. They sent me messages of encouragement, telling me how brave I was for standing up for myself. Older family members, who had witnessed the favoritism firsthand when we were children, spoke up too. They shared old memories. How I was always left out at family parties. How Tyler was celebrated like a prince. Memories I thought had long been buried now surfaced again, bringing both pain and an unexpected sense of relief. As night fell, my post continued to spread. More and more people voiced their anger. Some even asked for the police chief's contact information to verify everything. One aunt from Arizona messaged me privately, "Anna, you should have spoken out long ago. We're proud of you." Meanwhile, I heard rumors. My parents and Tyler were scrambling to do damage control. They posted a feeble statement online, trying to paint me as the ungrateful, rebellious daughter. But this time, no one believed them. The evidence was simply too clear. Their excuses only made them look even more ridiculous. Stephanie, not one to back down, tried to fight back too. She posted passive-aggressive rants about forgiveness and family sacrifice. But instead of gaining sympathy, she was bombarded with comments demanding an apology for her shameful behavior. Not long after, I received a call from Aunt Lucy, the one relative who had always been kind to me. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Anna, if you ever need a place to stay or anything at all, you come to me. Never let them make you believe you're not worthy of love." For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost. Validation. Support. A real sense of family. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of messages, congratulations, encouragement, even small gifts. A distant cousin I barely knew sent me a digital housewarming card with a simple note, "A small gift for your new beginning. You deserve it." Standing alone in my empty living room, sunlight streaming through the old windows, I felt a peace deeper than anything I had ever known. I had spoken my truth. I had stood up for myself. And this time, I wasn't alone. But the real storm was only beginning. In a small town like ours, rumors spread faster than wildfire. It didn't take long before my family's story became the talk of the town. Tyler and Stephanie, once the golden son and the perfect daughter-in-law, were now the punchlines of every conversation. They crammed together in my parents' tiny house. 3 unruly kids. Endless fights. A constant simmering resentment. Tyler's usual arrogance vanished. Stephanie, who once walked around like the world owed her something, now kept her head down whenever she passed familiar faces. Their finances collapsed fast. Tyler worked himself to the bone. But it was barely enough to keep everyone fed. Stephanie still refused to get a job, hiding behind the excuse of needing to care for the children. But that wasn't the final blow. One spring morning, the town erupted again. Rumors exploded. Stephanie had been cheating with a bartender just a few blocks away. At first, Tyler refused to believe it. Despite everything, I knew deep down he still loved her. But eventually, Tyler quietly ordered a DNA test for the youngest child. The results were undeniable. The baby wasn't his. The day Tyler received the results, he just stood there, frozen in the front yard, the crumpled paper in his hand. His face pale, his eyes vacant, as if his entire world had crumbled beneath him. Stephanie, as always, tried to spin the situation. But this time, no one believed her anymore. No family. No community. No one. Stephanie cried, begged, swore it was just a mistake. That she still loved Tyler. That their family meant everything to her. But her tears no longer held any power. Tyler filed for divorce that same week. I heard about it from Aunt Lucy, who continued to quietly update me. Tyler hired a good lawyer and laid out all the evidence. The DNA results. The incriminating messages between Stephanie and the bartender. At the court hearing, Stephanie tried to paint herself as a devoted, selfless mother, but her lies were quickly exposed. The judge denied her request for child support. Tyler's name was officially removed from the youngest child's birth certificate. The divorce was finalized swiftly. Tyler was granted custody of the 2 older children. Stephanie walked away with nothing, no support, no settlement. On the day the divorce was finalized, Tyler moved out of my parents' house, taking the 2 kids and an old battered suitcase. He rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town, living quietly, trying to escape the constant judgmental stares. Stephanie, stripped of her reputation and financial backing, was coldly thrown out by my parents, the same ones who had once adored her. I heard she moved back in with her own family, more than 100 miles away. The youngest child, the one who wasn't Tyler's, went with her. It all happened so fast that even I was stunned. The very people I thought would cling to their delusions forever completely crumbled. But what surprised me even more was the emptiness I felt. No joy, no satisfaction, just a deep, hollow stillness inside. Maybe, somewhere deep down, I had once hoped for a different ending. A real change. A genuine apology. But life isn't a fairy tale. The price of years of lies had come harsh, merciless, and long overdue. I thought that between me and my family, all that remained was a cold, unbridgeable distance. But sometimes, life takes unexpected turns even with people you thought could never change. One June morning, I was watering my small garden when an old car pulled up in front of my house. Tyler stepped out first. His steps were slow, heavy, burdened. My parents followed behind, their faces deeply lined with regret. All traces of pride gone. Tyler approached, holding a small gift box. Unable to meet my eyes, I stood there, arms crossed, strangely calm. Anna, Tyler began hesitantly. I don't even know where to start. But I owe you an apology. I stayed silent, waiting. I treated you terribly. When you needed family the most, I turned my back on you. I thought you were strong enough not to need anyone. I was wrong. I looked at Tyler. He was no longer the arrogant brother I once knew. Just a man humbled by his own bitter mistakes. My mother stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to take mine. Anna, I'm sorry, she said, tears brimming in her eyes. I was blind. I favored Tyler for so many years. I know I can't undo the past, but I hope you'll give me a chance to make it right. My father, the man who had been silent most of his life, finally spoke. His voice rough, but sincere. I was wrong. Anna. I admit it. If you'll allow it, I want to start over. I stood there, frozen. Part of me screamed to unleash all the anger I had bottled up over the years. But another part, quieter, wearier, just wanted to let it go. I had survived it all. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. Tyler handed me a small gift box. We've started going to church these past few months. He said hesitantly. I've learned that sometimes forgiveness isn't about the other person, it's about freeing yourself. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I hope, someday you will. I opened the box. Inside was a handwritten card. In Tyler's familiar messy scrawl. Even if it's too late, I still hope to call you my sister again. Tears welled up before I could stop them. I turned away, hiding the softness I had fought so hard to protect all these years. All right, I said, my voice hoarse. But things won't go back to the way they were. And it'll take time for me to trust again. We understand, my mother said softly, nodding. We don't expect everything to be forgotten. We just hope for a fresh start, an honest one. From that day forward, my family truly changed. Tyler began bringing the kids to visit every weekend, always texting ahead of time. My mother would sometimes send short, genuine check-in messages. My father, still the quiet man he had always been, simply gave a nod whenever he saw me. A small gesture, but it meant more than 1,000 words. I remained cautious. A scar, even when healed, always leaves a mark. But for the first time in many years, I saw the possibility of something new. A chapter without bitterness, without blame. One night, standing on my porch, gazing at the warm light spilling from the living room, I thought, sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't an apology. It's real change. As for Stephanie, after the divorce and the scandal, she all but disappeared from town. I heard she moved back in with her parents, about 70 miles away. But even from a distance, she couldn't let go. One late autumn night, the blaring of my security alarm jolted me awake. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the live feed and nearly dropped it. A hooded figure was creeping toward my truck. I watched as she pulled out a carton of eggs and hurled them at the windshield and the hood. Even with her face hidden, I knew immediately. The build, the gait, the movements, unmistakably Stephanie. I called the police without hesitation. When they arrived, I showed them the footage. The evidence was crystal clear. They quickly gathered everything they needed. I filed charges for property vandalism and requested a restraining order. The case moved faster than I expected. Stephanie was convicted of vandalism and ordered to pay for all the cleaning and repairs. The court also issued a restraining order. She was forbidden from coming within 300 feet of me. No calls, no letters, no online contact of any kind. On the day the restraining order was granted, Stephanie stood before the court, her face twisted in rage and humiliation. I, dressed neatly in professional clothes, watched her calmly as if she were a stranger behind a sheet of glass. Word of the incident spread quickly throughout the town. The egg attack became the final nail in Stephanie's already shattered reputation. People no longer saw a devoted mother. They only saw a bitter, broken woman, someone who had destroyed herself. I knew she would always blame me. But I didn't care. I did what I had to do to protect myself and the home I had fought so hard to build. One weekend afternoon, I sat quietly on my porch, sipping a warm cup of coffee, the crisp autumn breeze brushing against my skin. My beloved old truck sat peacefully under the sun. No more fear of vandalism. No more worrying about late-night doorbells. No more lurking threats. Just peace. I realized something. For the first time, my life truly belonged to me. Seeing that a 3-bedroom house was too large for just myself, I decided to rent out the 2 spare rooms. It didn't take long to find 2 ideal tenants. Megan, a night shift nurse at a nearby hospital, and Chris, a construction engineer who traveled often for work. Both were respectful, independent, and valued privacy. The rental income covered most of my mortgage. For the first time in my life, I felt stable financially, and within myself. And for the first time in many years, I knew without a doubt, I was truly free. My savings grew steadily, and with every extra dollar, my sense of freedom deepened. On weekends, My cozy little home often filled with the sound of children's laughter. Tyler, trying to repair old wounds, often brought his two older kids over to visit. Emma, 8 years old, loved drawing in the living room. Max, 10, was obsessed with the old gaming console I found at a flea market. In my backyard, tall sunflowers towered over the children. They called it their secret forest. One afternoon, while I was fixing the old swing set, Max looked up at me and asked, "Civvy, Anna, why do you live alone? Don't you get lonely?" I smiled, wiping sweat from my forehead. Not at all. Living alone has its own joys. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. Emma hugged my arm and whispered, "I like coming to your house. It's more fun than grandma's." Their innocent words warmed my heart. This house wasn't just a shelter. It was a home I had built. No longer under anyone else's shadow. Tyler occasionally invited me to small family dinners with him and the kids. Sometimes, I accepted keeping a healthy distance. Our relationship was healing. The old scars remained, but they no longer bled. My parents had changed too. No more unannounced visits. No more demands. The brief encounters, a handshake, a simple holiday greeting were enough for me. I needed nothing more. Just respect. And safe boundaries. Once, my mother looked around the house and sighed. "Anna, you did it. You built your own life." I just smiled, saying nothing. That long overdue acknowledgement was the greatest victory of all. That winter, Emma, Max, and I put up a Christmas tree outside. We decorated it with handmade crafts and twinkling lights. When the lights turned on, the whole street glowed warmly. I stood back, watching the kids laugh and play under the sparkling lights. And my heart filled with a deep, quiet joy. I had lost so much to reach this day. But in return, I had gained a home, unconditional freedom, and a small family chosen not by blood, but by love, innocent children, kind friends, and most importantly myself. My story isn't just about overcoming injustice. It's proof of the power of perseverance, the belief in one's worth, and the courage to stand tall even when the world turns its back on you. I was once the forgotten child, the one mocked, the one manipulated, but I rebuilt my life with these hands. With financial freedom, with genuine love from those who truly mattered. The past left scars, but it also taught me how to cherish the present. I didn't just reclaim my life. I found true peace. Have you ever felt like just a shadow in your own family? I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, endured long enough, someday, they would finally see me. But what I didn't realize was, sometimes, to find your true worth, you have to step away from the very place that hurt you the most. This is the story of how I, the forgotten child, rebuilt my life with nothing but my own two hands and a belief that never burned out.